Hi, my name is Zhilin Qiang. Welcome to the lecture of the types of study design. And today we are going to introduce the case control study. For analytical studies, the subject of interest is the individual within the population, and the object is not to formulate but to test hypotheses. And there are two types of analytical studies, that is case control study and the cohort study. And from the analytical studies, we can determine whether or not a statistical association exists between a disease and a suspected fact. And if the association exists, what is the strength of the association? And this is the definition of a case control study. Case control study is a method of sampling a population in which cases are identified and enrolled, and a sample of the population that is controlled. Then the procedure that the cases is identified and enrolled. Then we will measurement the exposure for individuals in both groups, and the right panel is the rationale of a case control study. Why to conduct case control studies are first, where disease has non-latent appearance, for example, cancer or cardiovascular disease, and another where the disease is rare, it is suitable to study the risk factor. Study the risk factor for birth defects, that the birth defects is a rare disease. Why the third is why exposure data are expensive or difficult to obtain. It is suitable to implement a case control study. These are 5 criteria for case control studies, and both cases and controls are from the same population base, and the controls is independent of exposure and represent non-diseased in base population, and the disease is ruled out in controls, and we have to measurement the exposure in the same way in both cases and controls, and we have to do randomly sampling to ensure that the control be a case, it would have been sampled. This is the 4 steps of a case control study, and next we will introduce the 4 steps more detail. First step, we will select the cases, and all of the cases should have a clear definition. That is the diagnostic criteria, inclusion criteria, and exclusion criteria. For all of study designs in epidemiology or nurses research, then 3 criteria is recommended. And we can find these cases from the hospital or general population, 2 sources of cases. And how to select the control? And control is very important in a case control study. And the controls are from disease and similar to all cases except the disease. And for example, hospital relatives of patients is recommended to a control, and also the community neighbors, general population will also are also considered as the controls of cases. But all of these controls have to be random sampled. Matching is better recommended in a case control study. It's very important to ensure comparability between the cases and the controls. And then to measure exposure in both cases and controls, it is obtained by interviews, by questionnaires, or by studying the records. It is in the measurement, the exposure of measurement is important to study the association. Final step is to take analysis to find out exposure rates among cases and controls to suspected factors, and then to estimation of risk associated with exposure. We will use the observation to evaluate the association. These are advantages of case control study. Yes, it's expensive. Expensive requires only a few subjects and quick results obtained. It is well suited for disease which have a long latent period, for example, cancer, AIDS, or CVD. it is well studied for real outcomes, and it is well studied for conditions for which medical care is sought. And the case control study will help us to examine the risk factors. And some disadvantages of case control studies should be attention. First, it is not a good method for the study of rare exposure, and don't give any idea of incidence or prevalence, or only gives the observation percentage association. And prone to variant selection, information bias, record bias, and observed bias may usually exist in case control studies. This is an example of case control study, which the paper has been published in New England Journal of Medicine. These are major references. Thanks for your listening.